If I knew what I know now, when I was buying my house, I would have made a different choice with my down payment. Can you buy a house with 5% down or should you put 20%? What if I told you if you wait to save 20%, you might lose a lot of money? For example, with an average house price in Pickering of $964,000, a 5% down payment and a 20% down payment difference is huge. Not just this, but you also have to have an understanding of monthly mortgage payments, CMHC premiums, and what goes behind putting 5% and 20% down. So in this video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of putting 5% versus 20% down payment, why waiting to save more might not be the smartest move, and a strategy a lot of home buyers overlook, which is putting 10% down as a sweet spot of down payment. Hey guys, my name is Harpreet Singh, a former financial advisor turned into a real estate agent who helped their clients to buy and sell properties in Pickering and close by areas. I help buyers and sellers navigate the real estate process in a smart way. If you found this video helpful or you think any of your friends or family who might benefit from this video, please share. And if they want to book a 15 minutes call with me, the link is in the description below. Stick around to see the real numbers. First, let's talk about the minimum down payment. This part, even a lot of real estate agents get it wrong. So what is the minimum down payment that you can put as a buyer in GTA? Let's take the average home price of Pickering for an example, which is $964,000. So the rule of thumb is on first $500,000, you put 5% down. So in this case, that would be $25,000. And on the remaining of the balance, you put 10% down, which would be $46,400. So your minimum down payment to buy a property which is worth $964,000 is $71,400. So your minimum payment for any property which is above $500,000 adds up to about 7.45%. But if you're buying a condo or anything which is less than $500,000 or $500,000, you can still qualify based on your income for a down payment of $25,000 to buy that property. So before we dive into calculation, let's find out what are the pros and cons of putting 5% down. Now, if you're putting 5% down, that means you can get into the market with a smaller cash. So you don't have to wait to save 20% down, and you can now become a homeowner really quickly. That means you can take advantage of future appreciation in the property prices. Second pro is you have more cash on hand. If you're buying a property where you only have to put $25,000 down, but you have $100,000 in saving, now that extra cash could be deposited into mutual funds, invested in stocks, or different type of investment vehicles. And the third pro, which also sometimes sounds crazy, is that if you're putting less than 20% down, your interest rate on your mortgage is going to be less than someone who's putting more than 20% down payment. And this is because when you're putting less than 20% down payment, the banks are covered by CMHC insurance, which is also called default insurance. Now, a lot of time clients come to me and they say, hey, I'm going to put less than 20% down. If I lose my job, if something happens, the CMHC is going to cover me. But that's not the case. CMHC is here to cover the bank just in case you cannot make your mortgage payments. So the insurance premium, which is also a con of putting less than 20% down payment, is an insurance premium that the bank makes you pay to protect themselves if something happens and you can't make your payments. That premium could be anywhere between 4 to 4.5% of your mortgage amount. So let's say if your mortgage amount is $400,000, you'll be paying $16,000 in mortgage insurance premium towards CMHC, which of course gets inbuilt in your mortgage. For example, if you put 5% down on a house which is worth $500,000, your mortgage should have been $475,000. But now it's going to be $475,000 plus 4% of CMHC premium. And that's why when you're putting 5% down, you don't have much equity left in the house. That means you're pretty much financing at over 95%. So if the market shifts towards a downside, you will enter a negative equity really quickly. So before December of last year, there were some restrictions on CMHC rules. For example, if you were putting less than 20% down, you could only qualify for 25-year amortization. Now that amortization has been extended to 30 years, and the purchase price has been extended from $1 million to $1.5 million. But I always tell my client that just because you qualify for $1.5 million at 8% does not mean that you should buy that property. And the reason is you should still try to budget your monthly payments, because when you're buying a house, mortgage payment is one of the payments that goes towards the house. Then you have your property tax, you have your utility bills, you have your home insurance, and God forbid, if something happens, you need to have some extra money towards it too. Now you may ask, what's the benefit of putting 20% down? One of the biggest benefit of putting 20% down is you don't have to pay that CMHC fee. That $16,000 to $25,000 that you were paying towards CMHC insurance now gets taken off. Second, your monthly payments are lower. You don't pay as high interest rate as you were to pay if you were buying property with 5% down payment. And now you have more equity in the property. That means even if the market shifts by 5%, you're still on the positive side. So one of the biggest benefit of putting 20% down payment is having access to HELOC, which is home line of credit, which is a type of line of credit which increase as you pay down your mortgage every month. And these are some of the benefits that actually comes or become a part of your financial planning when you're sitting and discussing to buy a house with your agent. One of the biggest cons of putting 20% down is actually to put 20% down. When I was buying my house, we had to pay $160,000 down as a down payment, which was even not including the $15,000 of closing costs. I have seen amongst my clientele who are young people, couple, just starting to work, it's very tough for them to save $200,000, $250K to buy their first house. People see in the upcoming calculation that the difference between you putting 20% or 10% on your monthly payment is not that huge, especially after the fact that now even on a CMHC or less than 20% mortgage, you can do 30 years amortization. So as a part of 20% down payment discussion, I also want to talk about the opportunity cost of waiting. A lot of time clients come to me and they say, hey, I want to wait for 2 more years, save that extra $100,000 and then come back to the market and buy a house with 20% down payment so I don't have to worry about the CMHC premium. The problem with that is the market appreciates on an average of 6% every year. So the $1 million house that you were looking to buy is now going to be $1,060,000. That means now you, again, after 2 years, you're going to be falling short of some money in your down payment, because the only way you can beat the market is by being in the market. So now let's look at the calculation difference between you buying a property with minimum down payment versus you buying a property with 20% down payment. So if you were buying a property in Pickering for $964,000 and you were putting a minimum down payment of $71,400 change, your monthly mortgage payment would be $4,335.66, which is not including your property taxes, your maintenance, your insurance, and your utility bills. So in this particular example, I would assume that you're going to keep this house for 5 years, and let's see how much interest versus principal you would have paid if you were going for a minimum down payment on a property like this. So your principal that you would have paid in 5 years would have been $89,402.76, and the interest you would have paid was $170,737.09. So of course, you're going to be paying more towards your interest in the beginning years, but this is what the number is going to look like once you have kept the house for 5 years. Then I say 5 years because what I'm talking about here is a lot of first-time home buyers, and a lot of time people like to upgrade after 5 or 7 years. That's why 5 years happen to be a sweet spot for me to do this calculation, so you have a black and white idea of what the numbers will look like. Now, if you were buying the same house with 20% down, you would need $192,800 just as a down payment to buy that property. Your monthly payment would be $3,633.09. So this means by putting 20% down payment, you're saving $700 a month in your monthly payment. At this stage, what you have to ask yourself is that $700 a big difference? But you can see if you were to put 20% down payment, your principal amount would be $74,915 and interest would be $143,000. So in terms of your interest payment, of course, you save about $30,000, plus you save another $27,000 in CMHC premium. Your overall savings between you going for 20% down payment versus you going for minimum down payment is roughly $60,000, which is a combination of your less interest payments and no CMHC premium. And this is where you ask yourself the second question. If you had that extra money that you put towards the down payment in your pocket right now, what would you have done with that money? Would you have invested that money in stocks, S&P 500, or mutual funds? And what type of interest or what type of return you would have gotten on that money? That's a big calculation, and that type of calculation sometimes will help you understand if you should go for 20% or you should put the minimum down payment or 10% down payment and invest that money somewhere else. I talk about the sweet spot of putting down payment. I always recommend my clients to go for 10%. And the reason is the 5% rule will make sense if you were buying a property which was $500,000 or less. The moment you start buying property which is more than $500,000, you're already paying close to 7.5%. So just by paying 10%, you save a huge amount of money in your CMHC premium. If you were buying the same property for $964,000 with the minimum down payment, you would be paying about $35,000 in CMHC fee. The moment you put 10% down, the CMHC fee gets reduced to $26,000. So you have an immediate saving of $9,000 in CMHC premium. Plus, you have a healthy amount of equity. Even if the market shuffles by 5%, you are still on the positive equity side. It is relatively easier for a lot of couples to save 10% instead of saving 20%. I have people sometimes who come to me and they have 15% saved up. In those situations, I recommend them to put 10%, but if they insist that they want to put 15, then I tell them to save up a little bit more and put 20% down and completely save the CMHC premium. So a lot of time when I have discussions with my clients, we also look at the cash flow. And I always tell my clients that you'd rather be living happily than being house poor. So what it means is if you're buying a property for $964,000 and you're putting 10% down, your mortgage payment is roughly $4,300. Now, if we add a rental basement suite to the property, you can get about $1,500 to $2,000 from the basement rental, which could bring your mortgage payment down under $3,000. So now you will be living in a bigger house and a house of your own, which is of course is an appreciating asset, and you probably be paying the same amount you were paying renting a 2-bedroom condo in downtown Toronto. In a lot of cases, buyers choose to put 20% down payment because what they want to focus on is on their monthly payment. And in some cases where people can manage their monthly payments and they think it's reasonable for them to make that extra $700 payment because they're putting 10% down, they would rather go for the 10% down payment instead of locking up that big chunk in their house and investing that money somewhere else. That's why I always suggest to you that you sit down with a real estate agent or your mortgage agent, even sometimes with your financial planner, and understand the whole financial situation before you dive into putting 5%, 7.5%, 10% or 20% down payment. My recommendation always would be to put a minimum of 10% down payment so you are also protected against market shifts. Again, if you want to talk to me about putting these down payments and you want to analyze your situation, you can book a call with me with the link in the description below.